Going on, everyone? John Matrix here today. How are you all doing? Hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're going to be jumping back into the Warhammer 40K universe. The next Primarch that my members want me to take a look at is Magnus, the Traitor Primarch Magnus, the Primarch of the Thousand Suns Legion. So we're going to look at a couple of videos that are going to go over the Thousand Suns and some of their lore leading up to me actually doing the Primarch video. So yeah, we're going to check out a video here from Arbiter Ian, Thousand Suns, Legion and the Horus Heresy, Warhammer 40K lore. As always, links will be down below in the description to Arbiter Ian's channel and to the original video here without my commentary and reaction. So if you would do me a favor and please go over there and check out his channel, give this video of his a like. He makes a lot of great Warhammer 40K content. If that's stuff you look forward to or are interested in, please go over there, check out his channel, and give the man a sub. He definitely deserves the love. He makes a lot of great content. So yeah, again, this is Thousand Suns, Legion, the Horus Heresy, Warhammer 40K lore. So let's just jump right on into it here. Take a look at it. Turn up the volume, let's go.
The Thousand Suns in 40k are servants of the chaos-powered Tzeentch, a legion of sorcerers and their thralls on a quest for the darkest knowledge. But it's a fate that took them a long time to accept, for the Thousand Suns were once idealists, a legion dedicated to saving the Imperium in many ways from itself. Hi, yo.
All right, before he gets like too deep into it, so for what I know of the Thousand Suns so far is Magnus was one of the Primarchs, and he was a very powerful psyker, and his kind of pride and arrogance about him being able to manipulate and wanting to know more about the warp kind of led some of the other Primarchs I think to not really care for him that much. But during the Horus Heresy, he found out about Horus's treachery while the Emperor was trying to work on and complete the Webway project. The Emperor, I believe, had set up a bunch of psychic barriers to kind of protect Terra from any kind of demon incursion while he was working on the Webway. And Magnus, trying to do good and warn the Emperor of the treachery, used some kind of psychic, message sent to the Emperor to warn him, and that psychic, message, I believe, broke through the protective barriers that he'd set up on Terra, forcing him to essentially have to use all of his concentration to protect Earth from any kind of demon incursion while still trying to correct the Webway. In doing so, the Emperor ordered Magnus to be captured and brought to him for, questioning and punishment, I guess. And, the Emperor didn't, I guess, get the full message of Horus's treachery at the time. So he ordered Horus to do so. Horus then ordered Leman Russ to do so, but he changed the orders to have Leman Russ kill Magnus, not just capture him. So Leman Russ hunted him and the Thousand Suns down. Bleh, can't talk today. Hunted them down and was trying to kill them. And Magnus, cornered essentially, I believe, just turned to Tzeentch for help. And not knowing what Tzeentch was at the time and what the cost was going to be, looked for Tzeentch to help. Took it, and then they became corrupted and are now, the Thousand Suns that they are. So that's pretty much what I know of their lore overall. But I don't know about the origins of Magnus or what kind of person he was, etc., etc. So those will be things we learn along the way. Anyway, let's continue.
Welcome to Heresy 101. In this little series, I'm going through the lore for each of Warhammer's Space Marine legions, particularly their origin in the grim days of the Horus Heresy. In this, I take a look at where they are at the start of the heresy and how they got there, and then what happens to them during it. Anyway, before I start, this series does contain spoilers, particularly for the Horus Heresy Black Library novels, but also for many of the rulebooks. The Thousand...
Which I still am almost done with the first one. I have the last 2 chapters of the first one to finish. I'm hoping we can get a stream in Friday. Planning on finishing that tomorrow, hopefully. And then we can get a stream in Friday for that, and I can move on to book 2. The last couple weeks have been extremely busy, so it is what it is. But anyway, we're close to finishing up book 1. Let's continue.
Sons were the first great casualty of the Horus Heresy, betrayed by both the Loyalists and by Horus himself. But they weren't without fault, and the arrogance of their Primarch and their casual dismissal of the Emperor's laws had provided Horus with all the excuse he needed to remove them from the board. The history of the 15th Legion starts slightly later than many of their brother legions, and their genesis came at a strange and ill-omened time for the Imperium. The fires of unification had been burning across Terra for generations, and the nascent Imperium was starting to take the first steps towards the conquest of the solar system, and following that, the Great Crusade, but the warp storms that had cut humanity off throughout the Age of Strife had briefly flared up again. And with this crusade on temporary hold, the Emperor turned his hand to the 15th Legion, selecting many of their initial recruits personally. These were taken from some of the most loyal, educated, and civilized areas of Terra. In many cases, individually selected, and the gene seed they were implanted with had a very low rejection rate. And so when the initial implantation process went particularly well and 1,000 new Astartes stood arrayed in front of him, the 15th Legion earned their name particularly early when the Emperor dubbed them his 1,000 Sons.
Makes sense.
The new Legion took this to heart, keeping the name well after they'd grown past 1,000 and adopting the M glyph as their symbol.
I mean, it's a pretty dope name, honestly. 1,000 Sons. That sounds pretty dope. It's kind of like when I hear that, it reminds me of the Immortals, the Persian elite army. For whatever reason, it just reminds me of that. Yeah, dope name. I would keep it too, especially since the Emperor gave it to you.
The Crusade started, they fought their first engagements, but aside from their slow and careful selection process, they initially displayed no particular specialization. Crusade Command assigned them to missions much like any of the other legions. It was a few decades into the Crusade that the Legion openly started to exhibit psychic powers in battle.
And wasn't that, I mean, that's pretty much kind of a no-no, right? From what I know, like Psychers in particular were kind of really looked down upon because, of course, you know, they're starting to play with the warp, which was something the Emperor didn't want people to do.
The Legion openly started to exhibit psychic powers in battle. First a few and then a majority of the Legion exhibiting some form of psychic talent. For many, this made sense, and they praised the Emperor's foresight, the slow, careful recruitment, the personal selection. Of course, this was the Emperor's plan. But Psychers as a whole were not trusted, generally believed to be the cause of Old Night and a risk that could damn whole worlds. Many considered the idea of a psychic legion an extreme risk. Horus himself, the only Primarch discovered by this point, voiced his concerns, but the Emperor wouldn't comment, and while they were often distrusted, with some of the early legions refusing to serve alongside them, they were also effective, on occasion even being led by the Emperor himself when he had to face specific Xenos threats. It was on Byzant, though, that people's suspicions started to become justified. The Byzantine had resisted compliance, and the Imperial.
The Byzantine, so we even have like they were getting into Byzantine empires from like actual like old Earth, huh? Interesting.
Truth, preferring to remain in the service of their gods and priests. The 15th were deployed against a human population who harnessed the power of the warp more potently than any yet encountered, and as they fought each other, the 1,000 Sons poured more and more of their psychic talent into the fray. The build-up of warp power was immense, like nothing the Imperium had seen before, and at the height of the battle, something snapped. A single warrior of the 1,000 Sons fell. The substance of the warrior's body slowly blew apart. Slick flows of malleable flesh spilled from his broken armor, bone fused with the sustenance of his war gear, and his blood misted and congealed into new forms in the air, all the while as the nameless warrior screamed for mercy in 1,000 silent voices, heard in every mind of his legion.
Yikes.
His brothers killed him then, and the event was hushed up, seen as an aberration due to the warp-tainted nature of the battle. But over time, it started happening more and more. It was dubbed the Flesh Change, and as the years went on, it spread through the Legion, affecting first a few legionaries, and then hundreds at a time. Though the Thousand Sons attempted to keep it secret, it was obvious to the Imperium that something was very wrong.
I mean, yeah, if, you know, this group of psychers keep using their powers, and then suddenly this flesh change keeps happening, and they get turned into these weird, you know, deformed monsters that start attacking and eating everyone, you would think there would be some kind of correlation. You know what I'm saying?
Fault in the genetics or cellular degradation, and for many this was evidence that the Legion should never have been created in the first place. The Sons themselves tried everything they could to halt it as their numbers started to dwindle. Medical solutions, psychic solutions, training and strength of mind, but none worked. Eventually they began to entomb warriors who started to show signs of the change in stasis vaults deep within their fleets in the hope of one day finding a cure. So, while they continued to fight and the psychic might of the survivors grew and grew, there were calls from across the Crusade for the Legion to be disbanded, a failed experiment that shamed the Imperium the longer it kept running. But the Emperor said nothing, for the Crusade had neared the planet of Prospero.
That honestly interests me, like the Emperor just saying nothing and not doing anything. I don't know. There's so many, like, kind of contradictory actions from the Emperor when it comes to warp stuff, because I feel like, I mean, I guess you think about the position that he's in, right? Because it's like he probably wants to do something about it, but, you know, the Thousand Sons Legion are kind of like, you know, they've been out there, they're public now, other legions know about it, Horus knows about it, so, like, you can't just, I guess, all of a sudden wipe them out. You know what I mean? Like, what would you like tell people then? You know what I mean? I don't know. But then again, you know, we don't know what happened to two of the legions that have been erased from history as well. So potentially it's already happened and been covered up. I don't know. But it just seems like when you first see them starting to, you know, take on psychic traits or whatever and using the warp, that you would want to do something about it as soon as possible to prevent this kind of situation from happening and the knowledge of the warp coming out. I guess maybe that would lead into them, you know, the Emperor telling them that, hey, you know, these are just other forms of Xenos. You know, they're not actually, you know, gods or other kinds of, you know, whatever, you know, the name demon is just the name for another, like, type of alien, you know, which is kind of the story that Horus tells Loken in the first book here. So maybe that's kind of the cover-up story that the Emperor went with, you know, in this kind of scenario. So I don't know. Yeah, the Emperor had his hand side up and had very important plans for Magnus that he himself dashed. He being Magnus, right. So it is what it is, I guess, you know, in those situations. And again, it just goes to show that the Emperor, for all of his might and power and planning and everything, he's still just human, you know? Everyone still makes mistakes. Emperor will always choose the path that makes the crusade smoother at first. That involved keeping them around. Then their powers became liability, had to go. Yeah, and I mean, that makes a sense to an extent, being that it seems they were rushed to really get things going with the Great Crusade. For whatever reason, that seems to still be, I guess, a mystery. As to why they really needed to get things, you know, going and done as soon as possible. You would think for a big undertaking like that, you would want to make sure you take time and are as prepared as possible. So, I don't know. Maybe he knew more about the Tyranid invasion. Maybe he knew more about some other things or some goings on with the warp that we still aren't, you know, privy to. You know, who knows? Also, just like Horus as the War Master, he had to be very careful on what ideas he openly supported. Right. Too many people were complaining, and that slowed down the crusade. Right. Indeed. All right, let's continue.
The 5,000 years of Old Night, the age of strife where warp storms divided and isolated humanity, happened alongside another strange occurrence: an increase in psychic potential in humans. This was the end of many worlds. Stranded and alone, their societies couldn't cope with the sudden emergence of powerful psychers whose untrained minds became portals for the strange creatures that inhabited the warp. But on Prospero, that story had a slightly different ending. Prospero, before Old Night descended, was a haven of civilization and enlightenment, with a huge and well-organized population whose cities covered every environment on the planet. When the Psychers emerged, many of those cities were destroyed and the population was decimated, but the survivors hung on, studying and adapting to their new abilities, and it was this that brought on a second calamity: a plague of Psychonoian. The Psychonoian are nightmarish predatory creatures who live both within the warp and in reality.
Nice.
Drawn to individuals of psychic potential, their reproductive cycle requires their eggs to be gestated within the mind of a living psyker in our reality. In the psychic blossoming of Prospero's people, the Psychonoian had found the perfect nest.
It's like I'm getting like alien facehugger vibes, but specifically for psychers.
Survivors, overwhelmed by the swarm of warp creatures, fortified themselves within the final and greatest city of Prospero, Tizca, a city of great glass pyramids and protected by shimmering force domes. The rest of the planet was left to the invader. But over time, the citizens prospered in their isolation, developing ways of controlling their newfound powers, refining them, and all the while keeping the barriers of the city well defended against alien encroachment. It was into this that the 15th Primarch landed. The Primarchs were created by the Emperor as the genetic templates for the 20 Legiones Astartes, but during the Unification Wars they'd been scattered across the galaxy.
Yep.
The 15th capsule landed in Tizca, with a red-skinned infant unharmed at its center, and the citizens adopted him as an omen. Over time...
Yeah, how weird would that be to, like, find some random baby, like, that looks human? Like, wouldn't you think they would think he would be some kind of alien? You know what I mean? Like, he looks human, but he's got red skin, right? Like, that's obviously not normal. And I mean, you know, there's kind of, you know, weird alien races out there. You've also just been through this, you know, hellish horde infestation of psychic insects that are trying to essentially, you know, use psychers to gestate and, you know, repopulate themselves. Then you see this kid with red skin. Like, wouldn't you think that would be a little weird? Wouldn't you be a little wary of that? But who knows?
The child named center, and the citizens adopted him as an omen. Over time, the child, named Magnus and known as Magnus the Red, came to dominate Prosperine life. He learned from some of the greatest tutors of the age before surpassing them and becoming the master, ascending through the governmental circles until he was
That is true, yeah, mutants are pretty common. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that's true. So they could have just been like, yeah, this is some kind of mutant or whatever aberration. I don't know. I still feel like people would have been a little wary after what had just happened. Maybe this is some kind of new psychic bug variation thing or whatever that's trying to infiltrate us. You know what I mean? Who knows? Who knows what it could have been and everything that happens in the Warhammer 40K universe, but
surpassing them and becoming the master, ascending through the governmental circles until he was de facto ruler of the planet and leading a campaign to purge the planet of the Psychonoian. He was an enigmatic and charismatic figure, a red giant of a man, possessed of a colossal intellect and incredible psychic power, devoted to unlocking the secrets of what Prosperine scholars termed the Great Ocean, but also completely convinced of his own methods and the righteousness of his path. His psychic powers were such that he claimed to have spoken to his father across the stars, though if that's true or an exaggeration, or if he was actually speaking to the Emperor at all, is open to interpretation.
Very true, yeah. You know, he could have been talking to one of the Chaos Gods. It could have been an Emperor, could have been a Chaos Demon, or one of the Chaos Gods themselves, you know, posing the Emperor. It could have been, this could have been Tzeentch's plan all along, you know, with Tzeentch being able to see everything all the time and knowing everything. Maybe, you know, he set them up to begin with to become enslaved by him. You know what I mean? So who knows?
Either way, when the Imperium arrived, the Emperor knew enough to bring the remnants of the Thousand Sons with him. The bond between a Primarch and his gene sons is said to transcend even that between parent and child. Between beings such as Magnus and his psychically attuned sons, the bond seems to have been closer still. For from the moment they were reunited, both Primarch and Legion seemed extensions of each other in thought, outlook, and spirit.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. Like, I guess that would be a unique thing for them compared to other legions. Because, like, aren't all of the Thousand Sons psychic in some way? So they would have that kind of psychic bond. Almost, I guess, to take from, like, StarCraft 2, like, with what the Protoss have. The Protoss have this, like, psychic link, so they always, you know, have emotions, thoughts, actions, reactions kind of shared between them at all time. You know what I mean? So I would assume the Thousand Sons probably have some kind of similar connection where they all just have some kind of like psychic link, and thoughts and emotions and etc. feelings can be kind of shared between them through all times. They might be able to anticipate and read each other's thoughts and actions before they you know, physically have to say or do anything, which could cut down reaction times and make them more efficient in certain ways, etc. So I hadn't really thought about that.
Magnus devoted himself to finding a cure for the flesh change. In fact, it was said that the Emperor set that as his first task, and he turned all the knowledge of Prospero to the solution and delved far, possibly too far, into the esoteric arts. But eventually, it worked, though.
That's pretty interesting that the Emperor would, knowing what the warp is and what's happening to these people, you know, would have him seek a cure for it. Maybe it's something that the Emperor knows is possible, but has never had really the time to delve deep into it. So he set Magnus with that task as something to do for his children or something. And I don't know. Interesting. It just, again, seems like it's a risk because you're trying to keep the warp, or not necessarily warp, but the denizens of chaos, like chaos demons, and specifically the chaos gods, try to keep them a secret. So, like, allowing a Primarch who is very psychically powerful to dive in deeper into the warp and the secrets of the warp, I feel like that's like a gamble, you know what I mean? Yeah, I guess only the Grey Knights can compare with their psychic bond in the Imperium. That's true, yeah. I hadn't thought about that as well. That, you know, the Grey Knights are similar to them in that way, only they just, like, specifically specialize in hunting down demons and killing them. So, yeah. They would have a similar bond. It's kind of interesting. You know, I wonder if one of the other Primarchs that got, you know, removed from history, I wonder if one of them was meant to be a Primarch of the Grey Knights. Because you would think that a chapter, legion, whatever you want to call the Grey Knights, something with that specific a task and that important of a task, you would think that they would have a Primarch, right? You know what I mean? You would think that the Emperor would have made a Primarch and, like, engineered him specifically for that, knowing that they wanted to create the Grey Knights. And that is, of course, assuming that he had the plan to create the Grey Knights during, you know, the time when he was making the Primarchs. But I don't know. I just, it's something that I have thought about and wondered is, you know, one is one of the, I guess, potentially failed legions. Were they like kind of the first Templar?
And a clean pair of shorts.
Thank you for the sub, whoever that was. I don't know why this happens several times. I don't know why it does. I have my alerts turned off, so I shouldn't be getting the noise, but it still happens. But thank you very much for the sub. I appreciate you, whoever you are. But yeah, I wonder if one of the other legions that have been erased from history, whatever, they originally were intended to be specialized to fight demons, you know, and they were kind of like the first, like the alpha, you know, of the Grey Knights or whatever, like, you know, or you know, the first edition Grey Knights, whatever you want to call them. And I think the Emperor thought Badness had a handle on it at first and kept warning him not to go too deep when he wouldn't listen. The Council of Nicaea happened and they were sanctioned and told to stop. Gotcha. Okay. Oh, excuse me. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue.
None other than the esoteric arts, but eventually it worked, though none other than Magnus could explain how, and when he emerged from this work, his newfound knowledge had cost him an eye. But whatever he found out there, whatever obscure knowledge or warp power he was able to harness, his first act had been to save his legion, by this point reduced once again to just 1,000 warriors, and so, from there, they began to rebuild. The new legion adopted many of the teachings of Prospero, the esoteric orders and schools of study, the 5 Prosperine arcane cults, and the two cultures meshed well. The new 15th were a legion of warrior scholars, fighting compliance actions across the galaxy, not just to acquire territory or unify humanity, but to search for lost knowledge. Their Primarch was an idealist, and like his legion, he believed that no knowledge or learning should be sequestered or hidden, and that
Well, you could see how easily he could be swayed by Tzeentch then, you know, the god of knowledge and all that. So I feel like I would be one of the ones that would probably get swayed by Tzeentch somehow, some way, you know, like if I were in the 40K universe and something like that, I could easily see myself falling under Tzeentch's influence, probably unwittingly, but searching for some kind of knowledge, wanting, because like I'm one of those people that wants to know about everything as much as I can. So I would definitely could see myself being corrupted by Tzeentch, you know, unknowing and unwilling.
his legion, he believed that no knowledge or learning should be sequestered or hidden, and that any truth, any power in the galaxy could be mastered. But Magnus and his 1,000 sons never escaped the suspicions of the Imperium. Their forces would often change plans or direction seemingly on a whim, leaving war zones suddenly or arriving at new ones without warning based on where the quest for knowledge took them, an unreliable trait in an ally. And while their Primarch was charismatic and personable and had more than a few good friends amongst his brothers, he could also be confident to the point of arrogance. This suspicion came to a head with the Librarius project, devised by Magnus alongside his brothers Sanguinius and Jagatai Khan as a way to safely incorporate the use of psychic power across the legions. The Librarius was adopted and tested by most of the legions over the course of the Crusade, but it always had its detractors, Primarchs who wouldn't suffer their legions to be, as they saw it, polluted by Magnus's ambition.
Honestly, the amount of passes he gave Magnus and Lorgard just cements in my mind he either lightly cared about them or absolutely needed him. Honestly, I tend to lean between both. I'm sure it is a mix of both. I'm sure that I do believe that the Emperor saw all the Primarchs both as tools to be used to be a means to an end, but also he cared about them. Just like I feel like the Emperor cared about humanity in general. Like the Emperor is doing everything he's doing essentially to secure humanity's future and place in the stars, and really, you know, to protect humanity from chaos. You know, I feel like the chapter, I don't remember what chapter it was, but in this first book, when Loken reads the book that Cinderman gave him that talks about all the various warlords on Old Terra before the Unification Wars happened and how they used the warp to fight each other. You know, I feel like the Emperor seeing this and knowing how the warp was used against, you know, humanity, and how carelessly it was used, and how probably close Terra came to being taken over probably by, the denizens of, the warp and various demons or whatever, that's why he's tried to restrict the knowledge of them and of its use, and is trying to essentially create a safe space in the webway for humanity to go to where they can't be, attacked by the Chaos Legions. You know what I mean? So, yeah, Magnus was meant to stand on the Golden Throne. That's why he wanted him brought back to Terra by Rust. He needed him to hold the breach in the webway. Right. I do remember I do remember that being mentioned at some point in time as well. So, like I said, I do think the Emperor sees all the Primarchs and all these Astartes and all that stuff. I feel like there's like a middle ground between both. I feel like he sees them both as a necessary tool that is a means to an end for him to accomplish his goal, but he also does care about them. Yeah, even Horus at the end knows that the Emperor spent his life looking after humanity. That's why he offered the Emperor an eternity of pleasure with Slaanesh. I mean, yeah. Yeah, so.
To the legions over the course of the crusade, but it always had its detractors, Primarchs who wouldn't suffer their legions to be, as they saw it, polluted by Magnus's ambition. Sanguinius and the Khan pushed for caution for the slow and steady growth of the project, but Magnus wouldn't be convinced, pushing further and further, and when the debate came to a head during the Council of Nicaea, he pushed for fewer restrictions, for even greater use of psykers. Eventually, the Emperor, silent for all these years on the subject, decreed his experiment over. The use of psychic powers within the legions was banned, but that decree would be tested as soon as the Horus heresy broke out. At the end of the Great Crusade, the Thousand Sons numbered around 80 to 85,000 legionnaires, making them one of the smallest legions, and these were organised into 9 fellowships, and from there broken down into the company-sized
the Fellowship of the Sons,
circles, and then into individual squads. The Legion made use of all the standard squad formations and equipment of war that any other Legion had, from tactical and assault squads to armoured support and line breaker companies. And at the squad level, they were pretty similar to any other Legion. While the Legion contained vastly more psykers than any other, they were no means all psykers, and the majority of the line Legionnaires either exhibited no psychic ability, or a very limited ability honed by the teachings of Prospero. However, above the squad level, the Legion was pretty unique. Most of the command staff were gifted psykers, though there were exceptions, and organised into almost indecipherable patterns of ranks that had occult significance to Magnus. The circles themselves were similarly organised and could vary in size depending on their place within the mysteries of the Legion. The circle of Ead 9, for example, consisted of 512 warriors, divided into squads kept at strengths of either 16, 9, or 7. And it was often the case that squad strengths or Legion numerical designations would have this sort of occult numerology attached. The Legion had used Prospero as their base since its discovery, and they were mostly stationed there when the heresy started, which was to prove fatal in the war's opening years. When the Warmaster Horus was wounded by a ritual dagger, part of a scheme by the word-bearers to lure him to the side of chaos, and he lay dying in the Serpent Lodge on Davin, he experienced his first visions of the powers of chaos. Magnus was half a galaxy away.
Imagine being a muggle and a legion of psykers. That's true, man. Yeah, imagine just being a regular dude in the Thousand Sons and being kind of the outcast because you're not the psyker, and you don't have that connection with everyone else. You're just kind of there. That would be interesting.
He experienced his first visions of the powers of chaos. Magnus was half a galaxy away, but he'd seen the threads of fate converging and attempted to save his brother, pushing his way into Horus's fevered dreams. But when it became clear that Horus was going to fall and nothing Magnus could do would stop that, he changed course. Breaking with the Treaty of Nicaea, he and his legion attempted to warn the Emperor, projecting his astral self directly into the Emperor's laboratory on Terra. But this warning was lost as the surge of psychic power played havoc with the Emperor's own secret project to harness the power of the webway. The great seals around the project were destroyed, and the power of the warp threatened to spill over and consume the Imperial dungeon and then Terra itself, forcing the Emperor, the Custodes, and the Sisters of Silence to fight a long and costly rearguard action against a tide of demons in the webway. The Emperor was furious at what he saw as another arrogant demonstration of Magnus's power and decreed that the Space Wolves Legion, led by Liman Russ, be dispatched to Prospero to bring Magnus and the Thousand Sons back in chains. But the Emperor couldn't deliver this decree himself. He had a lot on his plate suddenly. This decree was delivered through the War Master, Horus, at that point well on the way to planning his betrayal, and he twisted those words, delivering orders to Russ to destroy the 15th and their errant Primarch. And so for the Thousand Sons, their story during the heresy starts and almost ends with the first great battle, the burning of Prospero. At first, Magnus refused to fight, and his legion stood arrayed on the plains outside the city, but as the wolves descended and it became clear that surrender was not an option, the Thousand Sons fought back, and waves of psychic fire.
I mean, yeah, you got to think about it too, because like that's like the first major battle to happen in the heresy, right? So at that time, Astartes still didn't really attack Astartes, like it was unheard of, right? It was unthought of to fight against another brother in that way. So it's like, I could understand why Magnus would like not want to fight and I guess kind of try to take the pacifist route. And in so doing would hope that Leman Russ would say, okay, they're not fighting back. You know, maybe, you know, we can go and just talk to them and et cetera, et cetera. But I guess, you know, to be fair to Russ, he gave Magnus a chance to surrender, but Magnus or turn off communication and attempt to accept his punishment. Since his spirit was broken and he realized what he did. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's just, you just got to think about how messed up a situation that would be. Like, the first major battle is essentially, yeah, you know, watching your legion in your homeworld being assaulted and burned down by another fellow Primarch and his legion. And so it's like, what do? Do you really defend yourself? Do you escalate the war? Do you try to surrender if you can? You know, but like you said, I guess he was in such a depressed state that he couldn't or didn't think about it at the time. I don't know. But yeah. Pretty messed up situation.
That surrender was not an option, the Thousand Sons fought back, and waves of psychic fire halted the advance of the Sixth. It was only when the Sisters of Silence and the warriors of the Legio Custodes were deployed that the wolves managed to press the advantage, and denied of their psychic powers by the Witch Seeker squads of the Sisterhood, outnumbered and with little in the way of prepared defenses, the Thousand Sons started to lose. Eventually, as the battle...
That's why I'm saying, you know, when he'd mentioned that supposedly Magnus was speaking with the Emperor, you know, across the stars earlier on before he'd actually like physically met the Emperor, you know, it makes me wonder if it was actually Tzeentch, and Tzeentch had manipulated a lot of the stuff in order to get them to fall to Tzeentch's power and be enslaved by Tzeentch to begin with, you know. And yeah, so, and I mean, of course, there's also the chaos manipulation of Horus, getting him to fight anyway. So, yeah, Chaos definitely had a lot of stuff going on and manipulation with a lot of the events that took place.
Neared its end, Magnus finally decided to aid his sons and fought Russ in single combat, where Leman Russ broke his brother's back across his knee. But Magnus was as much made of the power of the warp as he was a physical entity, and his consciousness survived, broken into a series of astral shards, and his last great spell was, once again, an attempt to save his legion, opening a warp gate and teleporting the final few survivors and part of Tizca itself far away into the Eye of Terror as the city burned. Once again, the 15th had been reduced to just 1,000 warriors, deprived of their Primarch and stranded in warp space, and once again they started to rebuild. For the rest of the heresy, they were a rare sight, a shattered collection of squads and circles who either missed the muster at Prospero to begin with, or had sallied out from their new homeworld of Sorotarius in an attempt to locate the shards of their Primarch and reassemble his consciousness. Magnus would stand once more alongside his brothers as the Thousand Sons, with few options left and slowly realizing the cost of their actions, through
Yeah, right. My man hit him with a backbreaker. Leaving Russ the Undertaker. Yep, he hit him with that tombstone pile driver, man. You know, shattered his back. Yeah, the other thing to remember is that the familiar of the Thousand Sons were of demons. They also started to show their true colors at the moment, plus the return of the flesh change. Right. Yeah.
in their lot with the War Master. They were present.
Well, and I feel like it was also a situation where they were probably desperate, right? Like, they had to start using their psychic powers in order to hold back Russ's advance, which they did, and then the Custodes and the Sisters of Silence got involved, and so they probably got even more desperate at that point, you know what I mean? Because they're fighting for what they believe to be is their survival in their homeworld. So, I don't know. Like I said, it's a pretty messed up situation all around from both sides, if you think about it.
Realizing the cost of their actions, threw in their lot with the War Master. They were present at the Siege of Terra, but only in small numbers, and devoted themselves to bringing down the psychic wards around the palace and strengthening Horus's advance with the aid of their new allies in the Warp. And that's the 15th Legion, a legion many might say were treated as a shady experiment right from the start, a test devised by the Emperor and discarded towards the end of the Crusade. Their own quest for enlightenment made them idealists, but those ideals were a hard sell to the rest of the Imperium, and their own
Well, and like, being idealists in the Imperium is not really going to work anyway, because there is the Imperial truth, and that's law, and anything outside of that, you know, doesn't work for the Imperium. So when you have a Legion and a Primarch that is, you know, very open-minded in seeking other ways of being and et cetera, yeah, it's going to cause problems.
righteousness in the face of criticism didn't help. In the end, they were betrayed, first by the Imperium they served, and then again as the full reality of the Chaos powers and the bargains Magnus had struck with them became known. And that's where we find them in 40k, a legion of sorcerers still operating from that planet in the Eye of Terror and still resigned to their fate as pawns of Tzeentch. Thanks for watching.
There we go. All right. There we go. There we go. Again, that was Arbiter Ian, Thousand Sons Legion, and the Horus Heresy. What was that? The 15th Legion Origins, Warhammer Lore. That's the video title. As always, links down below in the description to the original video here without my commentary, reaction, etc. And to Arbiter Ian's channel. If you enjoyed this video of his that he made, please go over to his channel, click the link, give this video of his a like, and check out the rest of his content. He does a lot of 40k content, and he definitely deserves some love. So go over there and give the man a sub if you enjoy his content, for real. But yeah, so I mean, that's 15th Legion. Kind of almost somewhat of like an outcast legion from the beginning, just because of their psychic powers and abilities. They're always kind of I don't want to necessarily say looked down upon, but not necessarily probably really trusted by anyone else. And like I said there at the end, when you have a Primarch and a Legion that are idealists and open-minded and are seeking truths and other kinds of knowledge, that kind of goes against what the Emperor has created to be the Imperial truth. And so in the long run, it probably really wasn't going to work out. And again, maybe from the beginning, Magnus was already set up to fail by, Tzeentch or some of the other powers of chaos. This might have been a setup for them to begin with, the whole time. So who knows? But great video from Arbiter Ian, as usual. Like I said, links for his stuff down below in the description. If you enjoyed this video of mine, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it would help help the channel grow. As you can see here, we're doing this reaction live from our YouTube members. So if you would like to come in and join the discussions that we have during these videos, would love to have you guys come in here and hang out and join us. There is a join button down below. You can check out the YouTube membership tiers and see if any of those benefits have any interest to you. Regardless, I just appreciate you guys coming here and hanging out and watching the video. If you enjoyed this, you know, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and it helps the channel grow. And yeah, I just appreciate you guys taking the time to come watch the video. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day. I'll see you guys on the next